pausing the recording later on. My name is Nikolina Biskic, and I'm a pharmacist based in Switzerland, and I'm pleased to be one of the moderators for today's webinar, especially as we are having quite a high participation today. Mathew Cherian will be the second moderator, and he's a pharmacist based in the US. Today, we will be going deeper into the topic of how artificial intelligence is advancing development of drug development and clinical trials. And please note that the event will be recorded, and the recording will be available on FIP's website after the session. During the session, please remember to use the Q&A box so for leaving the questions which you may have. And then at the end of the session, we will be reading those questions to our panelists who will be able to answer them for you. I'm now pleased to be introducing our panelist, Dr. Olga Kubassova, who is the founder and president of Image Analysis Group. With a strong foundation in mathematics, Dr. Kubassova and EAG's team are passionately committed to accelerating drug development and improving chances of clinical trials to succeed. Now I will hand it over to Olga to finalize the introduction and start with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Nikolina. And I hope you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. And thank you very much to the audience. I could see that great participation. So Nikolina did mention that 900 plus people registered today. So use the chat box to leave the questions. And if some question doesn't get answered, we absolutely will return to it and answer via email. It's a real pleasure to speak with you guys today because obviously it's an incredibly hot topic and such a year full of AI, right? So we're really at the verge of something new and something different. So today I will be speaking about our experiences here at Image Analysis Group. So we are dedicated imaging contract research organization working with biotech and pharma companies for many years in trials where imaging is used as a measure of safety or efficacy of novel drug candidates. And you can imagine that this brings together algorithms, AI, automation, and many other things which are very relevant to our industry. So it's a bit of a disclosure on our side, and you will hear a lot about technology, a platform called Dynamica that we're developing in-house, in team, and we're deploying in clinical trials worldwide. Real examples from real life, but also maybe something a little bit more abstract to give you a broader overview of how AI is currently deployed in clinical trials and drug development. So I want to thank organizers, of course, for making this webinar possible and bringing a great audience and great moderators in one place online. Okay, here we start. So I thought, it would be very interesting to take 100 registered participants of LinkedIn and actually look at who is who and where they come from. And you could see that we've got between 28th of November and the 6th of December, about 100 and plus people registered. You could see spread of countries from United States to United Kingdom to India, Switzerland, and so on. You can also see incredible that we can get job roles and areas of expertise and industry focus. Probably thinking, oh my gosh, she wasted probably a week trying to go through 100 participants. In fact, I just scraped from LinkedIn a list of participants in Excel, dropped it in Perplexity tool, which is large language model, and anonymized it beforehand, and then asked Perplexity, can you give me a little bit more information about the audience and what their interest would be? Then I dropped the same list into Doma, which is AI and data products platform, which created me a beautiful diagram, which I could just use for any point of the webinar. And I wonder, what thoughts are you having? Maybe some of you are thinking, oh my gosh, she uploaded my data where? And she did what to my data? So I actually used ChatGPT to draw me a person who is scared, who is angry, maybe the person who also works for biotech companies. But the idea is to turn those reactions of maybe anger and fear and misunderstanding into something which looks like that. I can totally use that. Next time I have this Excel spreadsheet and I want to get some information, I want to spend 5 seconds and actually spend my time on presenting something very meaningful. And I love the little hearts and little reactions. That's the best tool ever. So that's a human intelligence. But AI is just exactly like that, right? So we can just use it for fun. We can use it for something purposeful and useful. And we can use our time to make AI work for us. I want to start with a few definitions before we dive in something very deep, because you hear about AI all the time. What does it mean, right? What is AI? What is not AI? I like splitting it into 3 separate groups. And I'm sure in a few years from now, these definitions might not stand, but I think this helps us to understand where we are versus AI. For me, first kind of low-hanging fruit is something I would call process automation and efficiencies. And that could be anywhere, starting from Excel spreadsheet, finishing from doing statistical analysis on a massive database. What process automation and efficiencies enable us to do is to basically get some control over large data, to reduce human error, to increase our own productivity, to really put some real cost savings into what we do day in and day out. My second favorite part of the AI, I think, which we also understand much more right now than ever before, is advanced analytics or data analysis. Meaning that you take a task like a radiology image and you look for a tumor present or not present. You can also look at a database and you can make a decision of yes or no. That's a decision tree, right? You can also look at a particular data type and make some of the statistics and analytics. You can extract those statistics and analytics from the data type. And I would call it data analysis. Could be image analysis, could be pathology data analysis, any type of analysis. Basically driving more data, more insights from the same type of initial information. Third type of AI is much more sophisticated. This is where we're not going to look at specific image and try to recognize patient condition or presence of a modality or a tumor. This is where we're going to try to connect disconnected insights, where we're going to try to look at the large database and really drive decisions which will help us to identify either patient subgroup or initial characteristics at the baseline, or any of the most interesting kind of fundamental information which can guide our decisions. This is the insight into the data which can help us to drive business decisions. How do we define those? So now we know that there are groups of AI. How do we bring the right tools for these groups of AI? So the very first, process automation and efficiencies in clinical R&D, that's just automation. It's argumentation or replacement of a human. So argumentation of the workflow or replacement of a human being or another human being, so you can actually be faster. When we're speaking about data analysis and advanced analytics, this is about narrow AI. So this is AI tools which are used for a very specific topic. They're used for a very specific domain to accomplish a very specific task. Insights into the data, this is where we're looking generally into the data, and this is where generative AI comes from. So here we are able to understand and interpret something using prior information and perhaps new information, but using generalized AI. So you probably want to vet your tools, and when you're applying them in your daily workflow or when you're applying them in your clinical trial work, you need to realize that actually there are tools with AI-related features. We are using Zoom, and you could probably analyze some of the data after we finish the webinar. Or you can look at the recording, which is also sort of automation, but this is AI-related features. you also want to recognize that there are AI tools which are multi-purpose platform. So they don't serve a particularly single purpose, but they can address very broad concepts like ChatGPT. Search, for instance, that would be an example of that. But I think one thing to remember, and here's a great summary of just available tools today, small summary of the tools, there are so many apps. Human intelligence is what we are. And bringing data, algorithms, and high-power service is something secondary to what we power AI to do. Let's make it relevant to clinical trials. Clinical trials, I'm sure majority of you are familiar with what it is and you know how much it costs, but I could say it anyway. So clinical trial starts with a phase where you discover compounds. You're using AI or you're using another tool like high throughput screening to just appreciate a vast amount of information and distill it into something which is simple, which is not going to give you side effects. So you're trying to find the best compound. You've got the discovery phase where you've got less compounds going through, but you're trying to really understand in the preclinical settings if that has place of safety and efficacy is going to hold. And then you're going to start testing through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, with phase 1 being normally healthy volunteers, with phase 2 a smaller cohort, and with phase 3 being a larger cohort where your drug is going to work. You could see how by going through discovery into phase 3, you're going to lose quite a lot of data. So the point of AI is acceleration of that data and making sure that we can actually get quicker to the answer that we're looking for. Why does it make it so difficult? What makes it so difficult to discover the right drug with AI? And you can imagine that every drug which we're trying to test is going to get into our immune system, and the immune system is going to enable us to look for cell-to-cell interaction. It's going to look at how we're going to respond to a certain compound, what side effects, and so on. And really, it's a pattern recognition. So this is another AI algorithm, which, the basics AI would tell you, recognizing a pattern that is actually going to work within a certain settings. If it was that simple, then I think we would have much more success in drug discovery with the pattern recognition techniques. However, it's not that obvious, right? So pattern recognition is one task. But then you're going to play against patient population, disease inhomogeneity, comorbidities, which again, even if you have recognized something which is specific, given all three factors, you just end up with something quite complex. Now, if you add to that business objectives, the size of the market, the standard of care, what your competition is doing, then you're narrowing and narrowing what you're actually going to end up as your actual compound. So if this is the case, we're starting to see an incredible spread of biotech companies which are using various tools across various modalities, to describe and distinguish our own tasks, right? So we could see that already happening in a really interesting way. So now we're starting to call it tech buyer. So used to be biotech, so now it's a tech buyer. And you could see on this slide how in the wave 1, this is probably the first wave of biotechs which were using AI-enabled tools to generate more information. By the wave 3, you now have your own data centers, you have collaborations with NVIDIA, you have Gen AI, which is using publicly available information versus proprietary information. So it's a completely different operation within biotech industry, even to get to the point of a discovery of the drug. But so far, it has been very experimental. And only June this year, I really love this publication. It comes from Boston Scientific. Only June this year, this experiment of discovering drug with AI has been put to real practice. So Boston Scientific tracked how many AI-discovered molecules gone through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and actual launch. And this experiment with AI got real value. So what we could see here is that chances of success become doubled. So isn't it fascinating? So we now have ability to get drug from the start, choose a market, and with double probabilities of chances of success. What does it actually mean, right? So, and what questions do we need to ask if we want to double this chance of success? Because every phase of the trial is not the same as the next. I know it's an obvious statement, but if you look at it, in phase 1, you are after targeted product profile, right? What you want is the right dose. What you want is a correct compound. You would be using surrogate biomarkers, and you would be using AI for a different purpose that you're going to go into phase 2 or 1B, where you're actually looking for phenotypes and differentiation between the patients. In phase 3, what you really want is AI or tools which are going to help you to make early go, no-go decisions, now maybe focusing on safety, because now you've got a really broad population of patients. And you could see how different questions need to be answered in a different stage of the drug development. So of course it implies a different AI tool. As you remember, just a slide ago, we were talking about AI discovery, right? So we discover molecular with AI, and now we've got the whole number of phases to take our molecules through, where each of them, which implies a different type of AI for efficiencies and for effectiveness of your decisions. Medical imaging, so my world of medical imaging and radiologists, is a tool, another tool to de-risk your clinical trial. From phase 1, where you're looking at patient selection and how to amplify your enrollment, all the way to phase 2, where you're building your maybe first model of predictive analytics, where you're really thinking about the baseline characteristics of the patients versus the rate of the response, all the way to phase 3, where you're trying to understand what effects your drug has on a broader population. So you need to remember that when we got a drug, we've got a patient, now we've got a population, AI will play a very different role from discovery all the way to launch. And these are fascinating tools which are now being deployed broader. So I think we all agree that potential of AI in clinical trials is quite tremendous. The challenge, however, lies in integration of AI into our process. How can we make the essential moves, the essential components of R&D to play to the AI strategy and actually help us to achieve the outcomes we want, instead of being kind of a barriers for AI to penetrate broader audience? And I wrote here what I think needs to happen in AI being an integral part of what we do in clinical trials or drug development. We need the right resources. We definitely need the right partners. We need the right infrastructure. We need AI-powered technologies, digital mindset, and the right data. I'm sure we can do more, but I think those are absolutely essential components. And I want to give you an example, again, from the world of medical imaging. It helps that it's so visual. So we look at the area of osteoarthritis. Those who know me on this webinar know that I love this area, so I've been working in it for 20 years. And also I've been looking at osteoarthritis in drug development. So this is going to affect us all to start off with, right? Every single person is going to have some sort of musculoskeletal disorder. You're going to have knee problem at some point in your life if you live for long enough. And we've been developing drugs for osteoarthritis for, well, as long as I can remember, plus another maybe 60 years. And there is not a single drug on the market that could modify or halt progression of osteoarthritis. Here you see a picture of osteoarthritis knee, and you could see that all sorts of things could happen to it. You could have articular cartilage erosion. You can have something wrong with your knee in terms of inflammation. You can have meniscus tear. You can have misalignment of your knee. So maybe nothing wrong with your knee, just the bones are misaligned. All sorts of things. Clinical trials, so far, majority of them, I don't want to say all of them, but majority of them would use X-ray image, and it's the simplest photograph of your knee, but just with X-ray, as inclusion criteria. There are so many phenotypes of these patients, from patients with obesity all the way to patients with injury. But the inclusion criteria will rely on the simplest possible X-ray image taken at the site. And the inspection of that image would include what is the level of damage. By doing that, we're of course including a lot of patients who probably not going to respond to the drug. Because on top of the osteoarthritis phenotypes, we have a different drug types, and each drug will affect and manifest very differently comparing to another. What does innovation looks like in this field? In this simple example, adding another modality, MRI, which is magnetic resonance imaging, will reveal you pretty much everything there is to reveal about your knee, including your inflammation, including bone damage, meniscus tear, possibility of a rapid progressing away. All of that just needs another image. Why is this not happening? Because there are so many failures. We know there are many phenotypes. We know there are many drugs. So what is holding us back? And for me, it's a fascinating question because, if I'm a biotech company, I'm thinking, do I want a fast, cheap trial with a high probability to fail versus slightly more expensive because you're adding an image, but much higher probability to succeed? What would I do, right? Well, the answer is obvious what I would do, but it's not obvious to what's going on at the moment. So what happens here, you could see that on an image here is just other criteria which need to be added by means of technology. And why I'm emphasizing that? Because you need to ensure that there is collaboration between a medical director who understands how the drug is going to work. There is a head of operations who is worried about execution of the trial and the burden to the sites. They're going to ask a site to acquire an extra image. And the sites themselves. So if resources are rightly aligned and speak the same language, then you need infrastructure. So you just need to make sure that you've got the right way of quick turnaround of this information so everybody can communicate around the question we want to answer, right? Then you need the right data, of course. So to me, the tech, the data, the infrastructure really make or break any of these trials. And of course, you can't go off osteoarthritis without highlighting some of the incredible successes. So this is a trial which has recently been published with Novo Nordisk, and all of you, of course, know about these amazing drugs for obesity. And this drug was used was given to patients with osteoarthritis to discover, of course, that they are benefiting because they're losing weight, and the benefit on their osteoarthritic pain is also very obvious. What I think many of people don't know, maybe they do, that Henning Blidau, investigator, and sorry for the misspelling, this is supposed to be 24. So the New England Journal of Medicine was published in 24. He actually started working on this in 2014. And I know Henning from 2007. So he was one of the first people who I met when I started the company. He was working on osteoarthritis for many, many years, aligning the data, aligning the tech, aligning understanding. And when the successes come like that, it's really tremendous to see the dedication of putting the teams together, putting the right ability to execute, putting thinking into action can really generate incredible results for us. So for me, there is a hype around AI and there are fundamentals, right? So for AI to work, we need to bring together digital infrastructure, data-driven approach to trial design and assessment of outcomes. And of course, we need to think about the right partners who can secure data privacy and security. And of course, that's what we want to achieve in this talk, so we can shift our mindset a little bit from AI to actionable insights and actionable, well, results and successes, which we can achieve with all our AI. So I will move to tech. Tech is a very interesting thing because without the right technology infrastructure, sorry for a busy picture, but I think it represents quite a lot of interesting things. Without the right infrastructure, we can't really deploy any innovation. Forget the AI, we can't even deploy, a simplistic thing. So this is a schematic representation of what we have in-house in image analysis group. Our platform Dynamica is effectively a central place for any innovation we can possibly conduct as a company. It's a backbone to any conversation we could have with a biotech or pharma partner. Dynamica receives all sorts of information in terms of images, PDF reports, videos, JPEG files. It also pre-stores information from the site, so which site uploaded this data, which imaging equipment was used, what type of patient it was from, and some associated patient information. Then you could see there is a little loop going on from a data intake, quality control, query, central review, and you can review it by using AI or just radiology reviews. And then you have the outputs which will track activities, red flags, quality, ability to read, so the reader could say, I can't read, and study insights. As a schematic, this actually can be deployed pretty much everywhere, right? So I'm talking about imaging in clinical trials, but you can imagine decentralized data collection. You can imagine decentralized pathology review labs, right? So it would be very applicable to that. What we learned ourselves that you can actually throw any task onto this infrastructure, and hopefully I'll show you a few examples at the end of this talk, and it works. So once you have the backbone of AI, once you have this kind of solid infrastructure, you can start being very specific with your questions. Our place in a clinical trial is where sites, sometimes would be hundreds of sites, distributed across the world. They would acquire imaging data according to a protocol that we agreed. Our team will receive images on Dynamica, do automatic quality check, and then do manual quality check on top. You could see how this automation and argumentation of human process. We then review it with radiologists or using AI, or actually using hybrid approach, which works really, really well. And then that data gets submitted to CRO sponsor to make decisions. Does the drug work? Does it not work? What side effects it has, etc., etc. And this is just, of course, a very simplistic approach, but I think it just gives you a good standing. Now let's review a data flow in a clinical trial. When I started the company in 2007, I think up to 2015, people were sending CDs to each other. So an image from the site would be sent via FedEx. It arrives, somebody looks at it, says, yeah, looks okay, sends it out to the radiology reader, and radiology reader will read it and maybe telephone somebody, say, yeah, patient is eligible for this trial. I don't know how long that takes, maybe 3 months. How long FedEx works, I don't know, very long. Today, we shifted our mindset from sending CDs, but sometimes the approach feels very the same. So when image arrives from a clinical trial in a typical setup, you would have several people participating in analysis of this image. There will be quality control, QC lead, who may send a data to the cloud. You would have a scientific input to say, yes, this patient is okay as expected, again, sends data to the cloud. You've got a medical team, again, some sort of decision, and then the patient gets passed. By the time all of these people conducted their assessments in parallel, not at the same time, but one after another, it will take quite a long time. And in this mindset, if the image is stored in one cloud, and now somebody has to take this from the cloud, download and send it to the readers, You end up two people in different location conducting their reviews, sending some Excel spreadsheet on another cloud. And then 3 months later, perhaps this kind of arrives and gets cleaned, and then you have a single spreadsheet. You could see that there are AI-related features, right? But it's definitely not AI. The sending of CDs no longer works in a clinical trial. You really need to connect every single player. What you need to make sure that technology platform brings together every single site in a simultaneous, nearly simultaneous and nearly real-time flow. So when they load the data into your server, the data becomes immediately available and it's traceable back to the site because they will be having questions and queries, and we need to sometimes optimize the protocol. The processing of the data has to be done, again, in nearly real time, and once the data is released for read, the readers should be connecting to the data without need to download and upload. So this is where the industry really going, connecting every single stakeholder within the trial into a single place where you can have data moved only once. So you're moving the data from a stakeholder from the site into the cloud, and you end up with the readers accessing the data. What difference does it make? It allows you to come from the result, the image and the result, all the way backwards to the site. And if there is an outlier, you can always discuss that result with that site and check the acquisition. But let me give you real examples because I think that's super interesting. So this is a patient with glioblastoma. And you know it's a devastating disease because patients don't have much to live, so they go on amazing trials. And these amazing therapies today, often called immunotherapies or advanced therapies, they would power your immune system to respond to a new treatment. So this particular patient is starting at the baseline, and you could see that the size of the tumor, which is measured as the sum of the perpendicular diameters, is 126.6. In the follow-up, you could see that the tumor increased. In the next follow-up, you could see the tumor nearly disappears. Clearly, the treatment works. And then it reappears again. So at the point of the third follow-up, the patient gets withdrawn from the trial because the tumor size increased. This is a point where we pretty much stop that trial for this patient without properly understanding it. Let's have a look what AI enables us to do. First of all, when we have a tumor in glioblastoma in MRI image, we no longer rely on the sum of perpendicular diameters, right? This is a very crude measure because as you can see here, you've got a necrotic core to the tumor, which should have not been measured in the first place. The tumor separated in two, and you've got a very interesting situation here with edema, tumor, and necrotic core all contributing to the overall size of the tumor, but actually not being tumor itself. This is AI, which relates to the advanced analysis, the second box of AI from the first slide. So this is where we're getting more insights from exactly the same image, just by automatically understanding what's going on here. Then we're deploying a very simplistic AI. It's really adding number of pixels, which contribute to tumor size. As a result of it, instead of having this point where the tumor increases at the third follow-up, we can actually say that we only have tumor itself 7.1 in milliliters, but everything else is edema or necrotic core. Patient stays in a trial. So this is the AI delivering really actionable insights into your data and allowing you to make a tremendous change to one patient, to one trial, potentially to the whole cohort of patients living with glioblastoma. I think that's the true power of AI, and I think that's what makes us doing what we're doing worthwhile. Oncology is a fascinating field altogether, right? So in solid tumor oncology, I know till this day, we're drawing a little diameter across the tumor and calling it a treatment response. which of course is works. It works sometimes, but given the tools we have and given ability to utilize what we call volumetric information, which is just the volume of the tumor, or radiomics, you guys can get an incredible insight, not just in treatment efficacy, but also into response of the patient, right? So each patient is different, so you can really start building personalized strategies around it. Now, of course, when you're looking at all of this mathematics and you're thinking, oh my God, this is never going to happen, actually it starts happening already. So we've been lucky enough to work with a small company, which allowed us to really experiment with the best methodology to find the response to their treatment. The way the treatment worked in this particular case, it was delivered in such a way that the tumor was reducing in diameter, but not in volume, but not in overall diameter. Effectively, from a round tumor, it was going this way. But so you could see if you draw a diameter, it will end up being larger, if not worse. So we looked at various endpoints, and one of them was volumetric assessment, and we managed to take it to the discussions with the regulator, which was approved for them to take it into the global program to understand how this exact approach could be deployed. So to me, these innovations are what we want to see, and this is something which is incredibly interesting. You could see how FDA approved already a tremendous amount of algorithms with AI. It's now in our hands to really deploy those algorithms in clinical trials in drug development. But all of that could be really simpler than that. Sometimes AI is just useful to double check what you're looking at. We had a very interesting experience, which is published with one of the pharmaceutical companies, where we really had first-hand experience from how to get the data right before it gets read. So we started our collaboration by looking at a drug given in different doses to patient population. And you could see here that we ended up with placebo, which is in dark, 1 milligram dose, 2 milligram dose in blue, then 4 milligrams in red, and then purple is 8 milligrams. If you're looking at response over here, you're really starting to wonder, why is it 2 milligrams responding completely different to 4 and 8? It shouldn't be like that. It should look like that. And the reason for it was very simple. When we looked at the protocol was extremely difficult and fragile to execute. The patient hand was imaged and the coil was moved twice during the protocol. Once the patient was imaged, the coil was moved, patient came back, the coil was moved again. There was an injection of gadolinium contrast to enhance certain tissues. By the end of this protocol, the hospitals were confused. I think the sites were confused how to do the imaging, and when they sent the data, they didn't get response fast enough. So we ended up, looking at this data retrospectively, and we definitely could confirm eyeballing-based quality control was not working. When we excluded the wrongly acquired images, because that happened, we realized that about 10% of the data should have never even passed to the reader. So when the reader saw those data sets, they couldn't process them properly. Once we have done that, it's already starting to separate in a much nicer way. And of course, this is a result of this trial. So you could see how at baseline, this is the fingers, as you could see, and this is the wrist of the patient. Overlaid on it is a map of inflammation. And you can see how this inflammation resolves from week 12 and completely clears from on week 24. This drug is going to make difference to millions of patients living with rheumatoid arthritis, potentially other inflammatory arthritis. And could you imagine that this drug would have not been approved because of a quality control? That would have been such a waste. Waste of money, waste of effort, waste of scientific credibility. It would have been just real shame, right? So looking at AI as your tool, and this is the poster, which you can maybe look afterwards, because this would be recording, so you could really check the information. Setting up your trial with the data in mind, I think what's going to make a difference. Everything from study configuration to site management to data intake to the beautiful image you're going to end up reading, everything needs to line up on a solid foundation of technology. And of course, we're very happy because, when we put something like that in place, we really get a very positive response. That it's just simply the speed of it. When you connect all your players, is tremendous. You end up with radiologists reading your data within 48 hours. You end up quality controlling your data, I think 7 hours I have here, which is incredible, right? So image uploads, gets read, and it's no problem for the site to get some feedback on it. So connecting the tech with something meaningful, I think really is going to make a big difference. So starting our conversation with what could go wrong and what we can fix by the means of modern technology, not disconnected AI-like features, but through a proper, unified, solid, secure platform. I think that will resolve a lot of questions already. I want to spend a few minutes, which I still see I have, on actually talking about real case studies with companies that we work, and they going really beyond the trial. I really love it because these are pioneers of AI. And I think thinking about AI even 3 years ago was something nobody really thought before. And nowadays, I think if you're not thinking about AI, you're probably thinking you're missing out and you have a massive FOMO. But take yourself back 5 years, right? Take yourself back to those innovators. And what I see AI has done for these companies and beyond them, so other players as well, is really seeking insights about their drug candidates to really benefit community of physicians. So not stopping at the simple assessments, but really trying to get something far beyond, far deeper. Really bringing the digital mindset to the communities, right? So pharma companies, when they have a drug approved, could just stop there, right? And market it through a beautiful booth at the conference. This one's actually took a very different step to looking at the digital way of approaching community. And I'll show you some really stunning examples. But also looking at the large databases of available data to really understand the value of what they just done and how that generates IP and further validation. And then, of course, one of the most important things is to bring that knowledge from clinical trials into the real world, because we live in a very secure environment within a clinical trial. We control everything. But how do you take it beyond that control? And how do you give confidence to physicians who are going to prescribe drugs to patients that what happened in a clinical trial is actually going to positively affect that real patient in front of them? I'll start with one of my favorite stories. So this is an algorithm invented by a physician called Francesco Delgado. He is based in the University of Leeds, and he dedicated his life to learning about scleroderma. What he observed is that himself was that in scleroderma hand, blood vessels deteriorate. And when you take an MRI scan with a sequence that is normally used for cardiac imaging. So again, remember, I'm talking about a rheumatologist in University of Leeds. He went off and checked out how the cardiac sequence looks on blood vessels in collaboration with the radiology team. And he understood that the blood vessels within the hand of a scleroderma patients look like that, versus this is his own hand, how blood vessels look in a healthy control. So he developed a methodology which is called DAVIX, Digital Artery Volume Index. The methodology DAVIX was published in Lancet Rheumatology last year. I have privilege to be a co-author on this paper, and I'm really proud to have that in such high-level publication. DAVIX now is also in a clinical trial. So I think this is an invention which took just about 20 years from a clinical bench, from somebody who sees patients every day, to then somebody believing that this has value to their patients and to their sites and to their drug, to integrate that into a clinical trial. I feel pride when I talk about it because you've got a physician who who is completely passionate about a single area of rheumatic disease, pharmaceutical company who took phase, and us, of course, executing this trial, and our team working with every single site, calling them and making sure that they understand how MRI is done with this cardiac sequence, because they've never seen it before in their lives. So now this is a true collaboration and alignment of the mindset. But you could see the benefits for the patients, and I hope this is going to succeed, because this incredible opportunity to take in new drug, new methodology, new way of thinking right into the community and right to the benefit of the patients. I give you another example, which is also incredibly inspiring. We work with a company called Cherian Pharmaceutical, and again, this is a publicly announced partnership, which you can look up on our website. This is a company which is specializing in female health, and this project is dedicated to looking at ultrasound images received from women undergoing fertility treatment. And what we're doing here is we powering use of AI. So I should rephrase, we're using AI to power physician at the screening phase to be able to predict if the pregnancy event is going to be successful. So this is a simplified technical pipeline where you take ultrasound images, which coming from the volunteers who contribute in this data. There is an annotation step where you're looking at AI, which allows you to automate the process and understand the tissues. Then you have the extraction of the features, which would be relevant to pregnancy event and may describe how this works. Then, of course, there is secret sauce, a little bit more AI. And then there is a correlation analysis and predictive model, which going to predict the pregnancy outcome, failure or success. This is a technical solution, correct? But this technical solution is going to be so powerful in everyday clinical practice that we're probably not going to recognize female care a few years from now. So a pharmaceutical company having a successful drug, having a successful pipeline of therapeutics, taking an extra step, taking an extra digital mindset step, convincing themselves, convincing their leadership, their shareholders, their directors, that they really need to improve it, that they really want to understand what value they can deliver to their patients, to their communities. They may, by this simple step, completely change the care for these patients. I'm going to do one more partnership and then I'm going to stop because I think we're running out of time. So this is another partnership which is incredibly interesting, and this time is between Takeda Pharmaceutical and Image Analysis Group. We announced that 3 years ago. And Takeda has a great drug called Entyvio, and that drug induces mucosal healing, meaning that inside your gut you have you take biopsy when you're doing colonoscopy. You take that biopsy and you start recognizing the cells, neutrophils, which are responsible for inflammatory activity. It's a pathology slide, right? For those who are familiar, it's H&E stain slides. A digital solution is easy, right? A digital solution, you take pathology slide, you start recognizing cells, you deploy various algorithms, and there are millions of companies who can do it. What Takeda and us did in a unique way, we have created community of sites that are located around the world. They don't know about each other. Maybe they saw each other at the conferences, but not necessarily. They all contributed slides under their own IRB process. And the slides are coming from everywhere, from Brazil to US to Europe to you name it, Israel, everywhere. They sent in us the slides so we can train the most robust AI methodology, which is going to enable us to recognize the cells. Dynamica is standing there as a digital solution to receive the data, to deploy AI, and then to give the reports back to the community. This is a solution which is not going to just power AI as a technical solution. It's going to generate completely new way of thinking around the gastroenterology field. You connect in multiple specialties, from pathologists who generally own the scanner and give the report, to gastroenterologists who may not be even familiar with the reading of H&E stain histopathology slide, all the way to the using the right drug, all the way to prescribing the right treatment to the patients. mindset, tech, data, you can pretty much do anything. So I'm going to finish my presentation with a couple of slides just to say that foundation of success for any AI project is to really bring the right trial infrastructure. You have to be sure that your data is secure, you have transparency, you have data interoperability. You just need to be sure that it's okay. And then you need to be able to use the digital endpoints, right? You need to be able to use much more streamlined information, which you haven't seen before, to make very insightful decisions. So we work across multiple indications, as you could see here, but if you bring the three together, you bring the security, you bring the digital mindset, you bring the therapeutic area of focus, which is very, very important. You really need to understand how your drug is different from another drug, what manifestations are there, what is going to happen if you do combination of the drugs, so you deploy it in a different patient population. Once you push all of that together, you actually enable an incredible stream of innovation. And I think AI is here today. So you could see how I've been talking about sending CD to each other, right? And no longer. I mean, if somebody sends me a CD, I would be very surprised. You have a cloud-driven databases for trials. If somebody doesn't have it, then it looks a little bit strange. You've got patient-reported outcomes captured via mobile devices. You already have easily deployable protocols. You already have a digital mindset in the community. It doesn't all happen at once. I think where we are today is just appreciation of large language models, really appreciation of what automation can do for our workflows. Once we stop being worried about how it's done, why it's done, and we start trusting it a little bit more, that will power us through the speed of execution. And of course, we should also look 10 years from now, right? So what's going to happen next? And we're already talking about AI interpreting data. We're already talking about in silico trials, synthetic arms. We're talking about virtual trials. Who knows? And we shouldn't restrict ourselves. To me, the biggest partnerships are going to come from collaborations between tech companies and pharma companies. You have to power each other, you have to share insights, you have to think about what the future for a patient is going to look like. And I think it's easier to do it when you're talking in small groups with partners, not individually within one organization, because I'm sure you're going to miss some insights. And I want to thank you very much for your attention, for the lovely hearts and thumbs ups, and it was very supportive during the talk. I will go stop here and take maybe a few questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Olga, for a great webinar. Indeed, during your session, we collected quite a few questions, so I will just be reading them out. One of the questions was, one of the attendees was asking, what is the biggest challenge in getting regulatory agencies to approve AI-generated results for clinical trials?
What is the biggest challenge? Sorry, Nikolina, if you repeat that.
Yes, so what is the biggest challenge in getting regulatory agencies to approve AI-generated results?
So it depends what we're talking about, right? Because if we're talking about a drug which was generated by AI, then the drug goes through the same process, guys. So it's nothing different. You still go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so very similar process. Nothing is stopping FDA to approve the drug. They probably would never even remember it was AI generated by the time it got to the FDA. If we're talking about algorithms, so algorithms also fall into different categories. If it's automation, then you have to look at what FDA requires for an algorithm to be approved. It's probably the quality of the results, reproducibility, effectiveness, etc. If it's AI-driven assessment, then it becomes a little bit more complex because FDA would require you to prove that you're performing as well as a trained expert. So if you want to analyze pathology, it has to be as good as 2 pathologists because reproducibility between them 2 will be not 100%. So as long as AI performs better. So I think when you're thinking about your question to the regulator, maybe also think a little bit back, what is it you want to ask? And then it makes it much easier to get it approved.
Great, thank you very much. Another question reads, how is AI able to get correct multiple data collection and it being authentic for a clinical trial?
How AI can collect multiple data from a clinical trial. So I think you have to think about collection of the data as part of your whole picture. So in a clinical trial, no doubt you're going to collect multiple data points from multiple data sources. Some of them will be imaging, some of it may be patient-related outcomes, some of it will be histology. AI probably not going to exactly participate in collection of the data, but it's more automation and infrastructure of the of the technology which is going to collect the data. Now, once you have collected the data, you pose a question which AI is capable of solving. As I showed you before, you can take a massive database, throw it into Perplexity and say, tell me about it. That's one type of AI, right? Of course, you don't want to do that because you never know what's going to come out, and you're not quite sure that's the question you were asking. You need to be a little bit more specific. Maybe you want to find subgroups of patients. That becomes a matter of choosing the pattern recognition algorithm. If you want to, for instance, describe patient characteristics at the baseline, right? So you have a majority of patients, you have characteristics at the baseline, and you want to see the most impactful. That could be a k-means algorithm, meaning that you're taking the separated axes which describe your patient population. So each AI will act slightly differently.
Great, thank you very much. We also have one more interesting question. So, to what extent can the accuracy of AI-generated results in clinical trials be assured, and what measures might be implemented to monitor the performance of AI?
It's a super interesting question. So AI will perform to the degree of reliability it was trained, right? So clinical trials is actually a wonderful example because your database is very contained. So if you're recruiting patients into a trial, you would have predefined characteristics. So anything out of this range, you can immediately spot as a red flag. So you end up with AI working on a certain point. Let's say in an image, it recognizes size of the tumor, right? Or shape of the organ. That would be your AI tool, which helps your radiology reader or pathology reader to not spend time on outlining that manually. We generally implement a hybrid approach where you have AI-generated assessments then signed off by an expert. It gives you the best of both worlds for now, because that gives you characteristics, or that gives you results of a reader, of a radiologist, but it's supplemented with AI. Our real hope is to see that, by saving time to the reader, we can also make cost savings in the reads. And of course, once you have this cost savings, we can pass them back to the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. So this cost savings might enable them to try more patients or deploy extra endpoints or get more characteristics from the same data. So I think the hybrid approach in clinical trials is probably something we can deploy already and should be doing it.
Great, thank you very much. So in the interest of time, that is the last question that we will be answering live. However, for any other questions which you might end up having, you can reach out Olga at the email, which I will share in chat right now. So Olga, once again, thank you very much for this insightful presentation. And before closing the webinar, would you like to share some last words?
Yeah, maybe just to thank you all on behalf of our team, because obviously I wouldn't be able to show you all these fantastic examples without being able to work with fantastic people. And everybody who I mentioned in this presentation is incredible clients, incredible partners to us. So thank you very much to them all. And thank you guys for participating and great questions. It really shows that we really need to move our mindset forward. Thank you.
Indeed, yes, great questions. And For anyone that wasn't able to attend today, of course, the recording of the webinar will be available on FIP's website, events.fip.org. And once again, thanks to our panelists and